Good morning. Okay, we have one more day before New Year's Eve and then we get to the new year. So I am starting a series I call Make It From Scratch. And so we're going to start with breads because I have this real passion for breads. Even though I don't really eat bread, I love to bake bread. And I feel like we all need to get back to making our own food. Then we can control the ingredients, therefore we can control our health. So in here I have 6 cups of unbleached, unbromated King Arthur flour. Right here, I pre-measured it. To that, we are going to add 1.5 tablespoons of instant dry yeast. This is so simple, and it's so great to do with kids. I absolutely love to bake with little kids because they're so fascinated by it. And I'm gonna show you, once we do the initial mix, we're gonna move it to a plastic bag, and this is how you let your kids participate. Okay, so we've got one, and then we're going to use half of the other one. So it's 1.5 packets of yeast. Or if you have a jar, it would be 1.5 tablespoons. Here we go. We're just going to make a well in the center, just like you would for pasta. And we're going to add in our water, which is 2 cups of lukewarm water. And then we're going to add in our salt. And I'll put all the measurements below. And we're going to add in our 1/4 cup of melted butter, so it gives it that yummy flavor. And then we're going to add in 2/3 cup of sweetener. Now you can use sugar. I'm using allulose, which is a sugar derivative, but it doesn't spike your blood sugar, and I really like to bake with it. So you choose what you like. And we're just going to circle around. You're going to see how fast this comes together. That butter is going to keep it nice and soft. This is a traditional white bread, so it's something that you make in a loaf pan, but you don't need to have a loaf pan. You could bake it right on parchment paper. But it's great for sandwiches because it's nice and soft. We're just gonna come around, and once it becomes scraggly, you can let it rest for a few seconds. We're not going to because we don't really have the time to do that, but we're just gonna push it down, bring it back, press it down. So the adults probably want to do this more than kids, but it's perfectly fine to let your kids help you. Push it back. And now we're going to transfer that dough and all the little pieces of it into a Ziploc bag. I really want you to get your kids used to making their own food because that is going to help them as they grow up to love to cook and bake. And that is something magical. That's something that they'll have with them the rest of their lives. And it's good for them to know where their food comes from. Okay, so you put all those little bits in there. And if you need to, you can always add just a touch more water. So I'm adding about a tablespoon of water, and I'm doing that to really soak up those dry bits. It's better to have a loaf that's overly wet than overly dry, because overly dry just tastes gross. Okay, so here it is in the bag. I'm going to seal it most of the way. I'm going to leave a little air pocket in there. And then I'm going to use my arm. Let's press it down flat. Press it into itself and flip it over. Do the same thing. Just squeeze the dough. And it may open up again. That's perfectly fine. Just press it down. So basically, you're kneading it in the bag. But kids love to do this, okay? So now we're going to seal it up completely. So just go ahead and do that. And if you don't have a bag, you can leave it in the bowl. It's really no problem. It's fun for the kids to watch the dough grow because it's going to come up to the top. It's going to blow up this bag with all of the gases that develop. And you can see the dough developing, so it's really fascinating for little kids. I used to teach a kids cooking class and a kids baking class, and it's just the wow factor for them. It's things that we take for granted, but kids love to do. So just like that, our dough is ready to rock and roll. It's going to sit out here for about half an hour, and then we're going to come back and squish it again, otherwise known as kneading. But it's kneading in a bag, so it keeps your counters clean, it keeps everything nice and clean, and it's super easy. So in about a half an hour, I'm going to go back and through, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you in the comments below a little later what our dough looks like. And then tomorrow, so this is going to rise all day, then I'm going to park it in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow I'm going to show you how to form the loaf. So you'll have to come back and join me again. But this is a great thing to do with little ones, or even adults. So this is something nice to do, and the result of the bread is terrific. Now, why the long rise? I could bake it tonight, but the longer that you let your dough rise, the longer, especially in cold fermentation, the better the development of the dough and the more that it will preserve it for over the days. Because if you make fresh dough, and I bake this tonight, it'll be good for a day or so, and then it'll start to get yucky and moldy. We don't want that. We want to develop nice and slow so that it gets all those break-downs of properties and it's better for our gut, and it has a natural preservative shelf life. Okay? All right, so here we go. It's just fun to play with. You can see I'm just playing. But I'll come back. I'll show you what it looks like in about a half an hour. I'll squish it up, and then I'll show you what it looks like fully developed, and we'll start tomorrow forming of the loaf and letting it rise and baking it. Hello, hello. Yesterday we made this beautiful dough for a old-fashioned white bread, and I told you we put it in the bag and we kneaded it. You can watch that video from yesterday. And then we formed the loaf and proofed it overnight in the fridge. So I baked one of them. I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like when it's done. It's nice and buttery. Brush the top with a little bit of butter before it went in. So let's slice it up and take a look at it. By the way, I love these knives. This is a bow knife. It's wonderful. It makes cutting bread super easy. But then I also have a machine there too. So you can see it's not white, it's yellow white. That's partially from the butter. It's partially because it's not commercialized. It's not whipped to death and beat to the pulp. By making it by hand, we're not developing over gluten. It's not becoming a sloppy mess. You can just see it's nice and soft. It squishes nicely. So let's put this one in the oven. I brushed it with a little bit of butter. It's been in the refrigerator overnight. I left it out for an hour. Now it's going to go into a 350-degree oven. And I'll come back and show you what that one looks like. But I wanted to update you on what the actual bread looks like. So I'm going to show you how I normally slice my breads if I don't do it by hand. Let me wipe this up for a second. Then I use a deli slicer. This is my deli slicer, otherwise known as a bread slicer. So we're just going to plug that sucker in. You put your loaf on here. For those of you that like to have your bread all pre-sliced, and again, why am I showing you this? Because I want you to do it. I want you to understand that what you buy in stores was made a long time ago and is filled with dough conditioners and junk. So if you make it by yourself, if you're making your bread by yourself, this may only last a day or two, but you can slice and freeze it and then put it in the oven and it'll taste like you just baked it. Let's go ahead and slice it. It's just like a regular sauce. I like to slice them fairly thin. So you can see just a thin, actually thinner than what you would buy in the store. Because what happens is, it doesn't last very long, but if you make sandwiches, you don't want ginormous slices of bread. You want the filling inside, and this is about portion control. So you can do thin slices, and then you can freeze them for whenever you want it. So this loaf will get about 25 slices out of it, and then the other loaf will do it as well. Now, I've mentioned that I'm not personally eating bread, but that doesn't mean that my family doesn't, or that we don't have friends that do. So I always make it like every single day. And this is what the series is about. The series is about making everything from scratch. Hello, hello. Thank you. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that it's super easy to do that. So the white bread, now if you wanted to combine the flours, you could do half whole wheat and half white flour. So I used a white unbromated, that's hard to say, unbromated, unbleached flour, and I used in water and salt and butter. That's all that's in this loaf. But you could swap out some of the white flour for whole wheat. Not necessarily is it better for you, because you do have to add a little sweetener in there to make sure that it has some balance, or it tends to be too heavy. But you could also use rye flour. You could use spelt flour. So I want you to think out of the box, out of the normal. Okay, so let's move on to our dough of the day. Get my mixer, actually my food processor out. And this is going to be a super simple dough. Again, it's just flour, yeast, water, and salt. So we're going to go ahead and set this up. I'm going to move this bread aside. We're going to get our ginormo bin of flour, which all my 50 pounds of flour is arriving today. All right, so we're gonna add in 3 cups of flour to start with. We may need another half a cup, we'll see how it goes. But this is what I call low maintenance baking. All right, we're gonna put this over here. We're gonna grab our yeast. Where did it go? There we go. And for this one, we just need a teaspoon of yeast. So it uses very little yeast because French bread doesn't rise really high. It just has that nice little bit of density, but not too much. So I'm gonna have to open a new one here. I think that one dumped out on me. And I'm just using active dry yeast. You can see this. And again, the trick of this is really making sure that you give it a long rise. This isn't a quick bread. This is something that takes a long time. And on this side, I put a teaspoon of yeast. On this side, I'm gonna put a teaspoon of sea salt, okay? You don't want them to touch because the salt will actually retard the yeast. So it'll give it it kills off some of it and it makes it so that it doesn't work as well. So we're gonna put this baby on. And we're only gonna add water until it starts to form a ball. Gotta take off the part here. All right. Grab a little more water. But you can see I really haven't done anything, so it's been fairly easy. Like that, it's done. So the machine does all the hard part for us. Now I use cold water so that the dough doesn't get too warm. Get that out of the way. Because you don't want it to warm up too much. You want the dough to stay relatively cold so that it doesn't proof too quickly. And then we're just going to pick this up and turn it so all the dough comes off. All right, set that aside. And we're just going to gather it up into a ball and push it together. Push it away. So that's the final kneading step. And then you have choices. You can go ahead and put it in a bag like we did yesterday, which is nice because you can sit it flat in the fridge, or you can put it in a clear bowl. So I'll show you both of those. I love these little disposable bowls because they're just so convenient. But in terms of space, a resealable bag is a great thing to have. Now, if you don't want to throw them out, you can rinse them out, flip them upside down, throw it in your dishwasher. I'm just gonna hit it with a tiny little bit of olive oil. Not that I wanna flavor the dough or anything, but it just makes it nice for the bag or for the bowl so that it doesn't stick to the sides. Okay, we pop it in here, and typically what I do is I put the time on the outside. So I know when it's time to take it out and give it a little love. We're gonna take it out and knead it in about half an hour, and then we just let it go. And it'll fill up the bag just like the dough did last night. So if you've not seen that video from yesterday, go back and look at it. I'll show you the pictures I showed the pictures of what the dough looked like. And then you just go around and squish your dough. Squish the dough. This is a very high maintenance thing, you know. Just squish the dough. And then what's gonna happen is it's gonna start to rise, and then once it's risen fully, I go ahead and form a loaf, and then I put it in the refrigerator overnight. So tomorrow, just like today, you'll see what the loaf looks like, and then we bake it. Now this is a high heat dough, so this will be baked at 450 degrees, where the one that we're doing today is at 350 degrees, 375 depending on your oven. So I hope that inspires you a little bit to see how quick you can make your bread. Nothing that takes a long time, and it's super healthy for you in comparison to what you get at the store. All right, my lovies, I will see you tomorrow to bake this French bread and do our next bread. See you then. I'll show you in pictures what the rest looks like.